Hey, welcome back to my channel. I am so excited to be with you here another week, video 2. As I said in my last video, I'm in transition, right? As I said, I recently resigned from my role, and while I still stand by that decision, I do know that that was the absolute best decision for me. I'm not gonna lie to you. I feel like I am still kind of resisting it. Like maybe it's emotionally or mentally. I'm not really sure what it is, but I think I'm still going through like those woulda, coulda, shouldas in my mind. My thoughts are running rampant, right? And also another thing is that I'm finding it hard to release the idea of stability. I guess I would say the old ideas of stability, right? Because if we're being clear, those ideas have never ever been stable, right? And so I don't know if you're going through something different. I don't know if you're going through something similar, excuse me. But if you are, let's discuss it. Now, one thing that I do when I am in these periods of transition or I'm trying to make big decisions about my life, as someone who studied journalism, has been writing her entire life, I tend to turn to words. They help me process my world, my emotions, my fears, my decision. And it doesn't matter if it's my words or someone else's words, but that's something that really helps me. And I think that hearing stories, whether the story is completely different from my life, I find that I can always find something in there that just kind of helps me navigate my life a little bit more. And I say this to tell you that I'm going to be talking about a book today. So the book I'm going to be discussing is called Take the Leap, Change Your Career, Change Your Life, and it's by Sara Bliss. Now, this book came at the right time. I think I found this I think it was like a couple of days after I resigned from my role. And I almost walked by it, but the title is what stood out to me because I was just like, what I've been doing is just not working. And it's true. You probably feel the same way, right? But what I like about this book is that it is a collection of short stories all about people who have transitioned in their life. They have pivoted in one way or another, right? It could be a teacher turned travel influencer, an NFL player turned art activist, right? There have been TV execs turned charity owners, right? The stories in here have been just kind of like all over the place. So I feel like regardless of who you are, what you do, what your life looks like, there is a story in this book for you. I can stand by that. So today I'm going to discuss a story that, while the things that this person are into are not necessarily, things that I hold dear to my heart, and that'll make more sense in a minute. Something about this story really, really stood out to me, and I really want to discuss that with you. So the story I'm going to discuss is, give me one second, it's called Get Paid to Talk Sports with Steve Gorman. The author does a really good job of showing like where they came from, what were they doing first, and how they transitioned. What are they doing now, basically, right? How have they pivoted their career? Now, I don't know if you know who Steve Gorman is. I did not know his story prior to reading this book. One thing I will tell you is that if you are a fan of the Black Crowes, then you know his work. He was the drummer for the Black Crowes. Now, what struck me about this story, now he's a professional drummer and he became a sports host, a sports radio host, What struck me about his story was that he was someone who always knew that he wanted to become a drummer, but just based on, his parents and, their finances and how he grew up, whatever it may be, he wasn't someone who could afford a drum kit. His family wasn't a family that could afford a drum kit. So he didn't pick up his first set of sticks until he was in college. Now, one thing that I found interesting about the book is that when he tells this story, he's like, I think it was a friend in college had a drum kit, And I didn't get the impression that he was good, but the first time that he sat behind the drum kit is when he realized he knew what he was doing, even if he wasn't necessarily good. He said that he had realized that he had been a little obsessive about watching drummers, listening to drummers, seeing what they were doing, which kind of informed where he was in college on his first day behind a drum kit, right? Now, let's talk a little bit about that. So, first time he picks up the sixth college, he gets an opportunity to do like a party. He does it. He's not necessarily good, but he's finding that he's figuring out his way, right? Which I think is pretty cool. From there, now graduation is looming, right? And he's like, what am I going to do, right? He has two loves. He has music and sports. Those are his two loves. He's like, what am I going to do, right? And I think a friend in college basically tells him like, hey, I'm starting a band. I'm moving to Atlanta. You should be my drummer. He says yes. Now, this is something you should know. He still did not own a drum set. He packed up his belongings, moved to Atlanta, still did not own a drum set. He had to be in Atlanta and go to the instrument store to buy his drum kit. Because, as he told the clerk, hey, I just moved here. I'm already in a band, but I've never owned a drum kit. What do I need to know? What kit should I get? What? Now, I tell you this story because if you see me looking down, it's because I'm looking down at my notes. But I tell you this story because all of this stuff, and he just said yes. Never played the drums, didn't know anyone in Atlanta, said yes to being a part of a band, even though his skills probably wasn't all the way where they needed to be. He didn't even own a drum set. But he said, I'm going to figure it out and I'm going to say yes. And I just, how good is that? How good is that? It's so good. And so, what I ask you, this is the question that I ask you. What if the path your life takes next is dependent on your ability or inability to say yes? Now, I want you to sit with that because I'm going to be honest. I have been sitting with that question for days. I read this passage a couple days ago and it has just been sitting on me for days, and I was like, I got to talk about this. Because truly, his life just, it's wild. It's wild. So the book goes on to say that, he was a drummer for the Black Crowes for more than 2 decades. And he was at a point where, he still loved music, but he also still loved sports. And he got the opportunity to be on a friend's show. And he loved it. He enjoyed it. So much so that when they asked him, hey, do you want to come on more regularly? Guess what he said? You guessed it. He said yes. But it wasn't just that he said yes. There was a point in his time where he also said, yeah, I want to do this, but I also want my own show, and this is what I want it to be. Now, the show, and I'm so sorry, I don't remember the name, but the show he pitched ended up being musicians talking sports. Now, it worked for him because he ended up moving to Nashville. It worked for him, right? And now he has this, that's how he became a sports radio host. Because he said yes. He kept saying yes. And it just, again, what if the path your life takes next is dependent on your ability or inability to say yes? It just gets me because I think about stories, or I think about times in my life where there were things that I wanted, but I said no out of habit no out of habit instead of saying yes with excitement. One story that I can very vividly remember is that a couple years ago, I just came back from vacation. And I mean, when I say just came back from vacation, I might have been in office maybe 2 or 3 days from coming back, right? And that morning I remember texting my sister, telling her about my trip. Hey, I had a great time, loved it, want to do this more. We created like a list of places that we wanted to go to. And around that time was my former boss's birthday. And what am I trying to say? Goodness, I organized a happy hour for her. So there is our team, and it's probably like 8 or 10 of us, right? And it comes out that my boss is going to Spain for her birthday, but she's going alone. And I was like, we all were like, you can't go to Spain for your birthday and just spend it alone. And she ends up being like, do you want to come? Excuse me? And so now I'm sitting there, and it's so crazy because I vividly remember this. All of the people around me, I'm pretty much like in the middle of the table, all of the people around me are now pulling out their phones. They're going to their favorite travel sites, and they're pulling up flights for me like, Yazzie, do it. And here I am, mind you, that morning, I just told my sister, I want to travel more. But when the opportunity came, literally within hours, guess what I did? Oh my gosh, guys, I just came back from vacation. I don't know. I have to check my finances. It takes a while for me to make decisions. Making all the excuses. An Olympic excuse maker. But that was something that I really wanted. Now, if you're wondering, I did end up going. And I spent, I don't know, maybe 4 days, 3 nights or something like that in a beautiful town called San Sebastian, Spain. It was absolutely beautiful. It was their winter months, so it was a little cold and a little dreary, which I was not expecting. I came in like this thin little jacket and definitely had to buy like this little like sweater thing, but it was beautiful. I was also able to see Madrid. I spent maybe 5 to 8 hours. No, it might have been like 5 hours in Madrid. My former boss used to live there, so she was just dragging me around the city to all the places that I needed to see. And we even went to this cute little I want to say cafe shop, but I don't know if you would call it a cafe shop, where they sell like the most amazing and decadent and thick and creamy hot chocolate, and with churros, which y'all, I love me some churros. They were just so good. Now, I wouldn't have had that experience, and yes, it took me time to say it, but I wouldn't have been able to tell you guys that if I didn't say yes. Now, I hope that you think about that. But before we end today's video, I want to read a passage from Steve Gorman's excerpt. It's a short little paragraph, and it's the last paragraph in his excerpt. And he said, one second. When I was in college, I read this quote that said, life rewards action. I thought I would get it as a tattoo, but I don't really need to. I've kind of lived by that. I was doing a lot of thinking and planning for both careers before I really realized it. So when they hit, I was ready. Sometimes you have to jump in and see what happens. It's worked so far. Whew, y'all, I read that passage to you because, again, I am in transition. I'm still trying to figure out what's next for me, and I believe that you are here today because you're kind of in a similar situation. And I want you to hold on to that idea of life rewards action, right? Sometimes you just need to jump in. This is me jumping in, sitting in front of you, talking to you, right? And so now I challenge you. I challenge you this week that I want you to think of one thing, just one thing that you can say yes to. And do me a favor, drop it in the comments below. I want to see what you're saying yes to. I want to see you along this journey. Please, I'm so excited to learn more about you and your stories. And I hope that you enjoyed today's video. And if you did, please give me that thumbs up and subscribe. I look forward to seeing your stories, and I look forward to seeing you next week.